So we're back, and it's COMP1011. It's Advanced Object-Oriented Programming, and it's Week 2, Lesson 2, Part 4. I just took a small break. I wanted to talk about interfaces a little bit and how to create them and what they are. So remember, when we create classes and we want to inherit classes and stuff like that, when we use the extends keyword to show that we're going to be taking all the information that's held pretty much inside the superclass, except for we're not forcing you to use the constructor, but other than that, you inherit all methods, all private methods, all public methods. The only thing that stops is your, for example, if I have a public method a private method in the hero class. Here's my private method is generate abilities, right? Can I call my generate abilities method directly from a subclass? Okay, so Jean-Claude says no. Guys, give me the answer. What about your S? So can I call generate abilities, which is a private member, from my subclass? Why can I not? Because of the private keyword, right? So if I want to use generate abilities, the only place I can use it is because it exists in the constructor of my superclass, the hero, right? I can call the constructor, and therefore, because my hero is calling generate abilities, right? Therefore, I can do that. I can call the class. But if I want to make generate abilities, if I want to make it available, yes, to my other ones, I have to change this to protected. If I do that, right? If I just change this to protected, then if I go to my villain, and if I go into my superclass for my villain, I could put in, this dot generate abilities, right? See how it's available? If I go back to the hero class and go back to private the way it was, so I got to cover this piece. Sorry guys, if I don't cover this piece, you're not covered. We're almost done though. We almost did everything we need to do for today. If I go to try this again, this dot show abilities is cool, but I can't. There is no generate abilities. I can't do that, and the reason for that is because it's a private member. Okay. This is cool. So that's the difference. We've talked about private instance variables, but we never talked about private methods. And there are private methods that you don't want to be used. Remember, the idea about private and public and protected is all around encapsulation, which is another piece of the object-oriented puzzle, right? Which is encapsulation means we want to information hide, right? We want to only expose the pieces that we need to expose, even to our subclasses, right? So the other pieces we want to hide because, we want users of the class only to be able to use the stuff that we want them to use and nothing else. At the same token, we can force people to do things in a class. As an example, when we create classes by creating something called a interface. By the way, I can take this auto-generated stub out for the villain. I forgot to do that. I did it for everyone else though for some reason. I don't understand how I forgot it for the villain. Maybe I don't like the villain. How do I create an interface? It's the same way we created a class. I'm going to go right to the source. I'm going to go new, and if you notice, I can go interface. Okay. When I do that, it says, hey, here's my source folder. Here's my package. It's the default package. I have other interfaces I can extend. I can add other interfaces. I can extend interfaces. We won't go there right now. But my modifiers for my interface has to be public. If I make them package, as an example, it means anything in the package can use my interfaces, but nothing outside of my package. Right? That's my modifier. So public or package are the two modifiers. Let's leave it at public for now. And we'll call this, think about the hero or the villain, right? These guys, they need a couple things that they always have to have. And what do we say they always have to have? They can fight and they can run, right? They can fight and they can run. So I'm going to make it so that these are actions. So I'm going to create an action interface. Right? I'm going to finish. When I create my action interface, here's my action interface. It's a public interface. I can specify my methods, the methods that I want. And this is kind of weird, abstract kind of thinking when we do this, right? Think about structure for my hero. I want him to have a method that's called fights, which I have that, right, already. So let's put it in. Let's make it more formal, right? So if I put it in here, I'm going to call it fights, not fits, fights, right, as a method. Now it says, if I just like enter fights like that, and if I right click or if I hover over them, right, as an example, it says return type for the method is missing. Well, I know that fights is going to be void. I'm not going to return anything there, right? But look, I can simply put fights without an access modifier on the outside. I know that it should be public because I should be able to access it from outside, right? I'm creating a blueprint for my class, but look what I'm doing. I'm not defining what fights does. I'm just stating the method name itself. Here's the next one. Public void runs, right? Okay. So let's leave it like that for now. So there's two methods that I've defined in my interface, right? And I want my hero to implement my interface. So if I go to my hero and I want to put a little bit of structure around him, right? I can use the implements keyword, right? Action. Now, if I have a problem, I can kind of zero in on it. It says the type hero must implement the inherited abstract method action runs. And do I have runs? I have something else called run. I have two methods, fight and run. I don't have runs. And this is what action does. When I create a hero, and because I called it runs instead of run, I don't have a runs method. I have a run method, which is different. And it's telling me this is why. It's almost like forcing me to adopt a shape to my class. Okay? And the shape has got to include, these two methods. It's almost like I'm forcing you to do that. I'm forcing you to use these two methods. Okay. So that way, if I go back to my action interface, if I can get to it. It's not runs, it's run. Right, so these are the two actions I have, right? My actions interface. Define required actions, because this is what I've created. The hero takes action, right? The villains take action too, right? But what about my vigilante? He's extending the hero, right? How come he doesn't have an error? I'm not implementing actions through my. I'm not implementing that interface. But how come I'm not getting an error? Let's go back to my hero for a second. Okay, save everything. Right? I'm still getting an error. It says the type hero must implement the inherited abstract method action fights. Oh, hey, do I have a fights or is it fight?
Fight.
See? This is good.
I changed it to fight. Still in
I
there.
could. Hold on. Let's go back to hero. My hero implements action, and now there's no error anymore. So you see what I did? I said fights and runs, and both fights and runs were not the methods that he had, the hero, and therefore it errored out. It said, wait a minute, you have to have these two methods. I haven't defined the methods. I've just stated the shape of the class. This is very abstract thinking, okay? So think about if I'm forcing you to have a shape, why would I want you to do that? Why do I really want you to do that? Well, in this particular case, I'm forcing the hero as an entity, as an avatar, right? Forcing him to take this action, to take basically these two things. He has to be able to fight and he has to be able to move somehow, right? runs is his move. Right? If I don't have those two things, I can't use him for some reason or another. I need him to have these two methods because later on he's going to be able to fight the villain. And if he doesn't have a fight, then he can't fight. He can't do that action, right? And that's why I'm forcing him to have that action by implementing an interface. Okay? Sometimes we need to do that because we might have multiple classes inherited from our class. So we make, instead of a hero class, let's say we created an entity class. And the entity class was a super class, way above the hero class. And let's say the entity had other abilities. He was able to fight and run, right? He implements those two things. But what I say is that all of their subclasses also have to implement their actions, that action, fight and run. We can create an abstract class like that, where I define, I don't actually define the members of the class, right? But I tell them that you have to have these methods and these properties as well. So I can do that with the properties. I have strength, speed, and health. And if I go back into my action interface, this is cool. I want to create another interface called abilities, right? So now I'm really creating the shape of my hero class, right? It's forcing me to do this. So I'm going to go right-click on my source. I'm going to go New Interface. And in my interface, I'm going to call this Abilities with a capital A. Action or Ability. Maybe, yeah, Abilities is fine. It's fine. More than one. And in my Abilities interface, I'm going to declare some protected variables. One of them is going to be called strength, right? Which is going to be of type int. Another one is going to be, just bear with me here while we do this. This is what I want to do, right? I want to create some other things for my shape of my class. Speed and strength, speed, and health. Right? These are things that all of my entities will, kind of are good with. But look at the error I get. If I hover over here, the idea is the same. It says illegal modifier for the interface field ability strength. Only public, static, and final are permitted. Okay, there's a reason for this, right?
They're protected.
If I say protected, if I make my hero, if I change this stuff instead of public to static or final, right? Or if I leave it out, right? The default is public. That means they're going to be exposed, right? And I need them to be exposed because I'm creating an interface, right? In this particular case, they're interfaces for my properties, right? So let me explain. So if I do this, let's say remove the modifier. I'll use the fix. Okay, so I'll do the same thing with this one. So I remove the modifier. So I get rid of the protected, and I'll get rid of the protected here as well, right? And then I save this thing. Now it says, hey, there's a problem. The blank final field strength may not have been initialized, right? I'm not initializing it, right? If I go final here, like we did before, final int strength, right, and I hover over it, the blank final field strength may not have been initialized, right? It's giving me an error, and the reason why is it's asking. I haven't set up my abilities or anything like that, but there's a certain set of things I need to put in for properties that are different than methods. You could create the shape of your class this way as well, right? I'm creating my methods, I'm creating my properties, I'm creating an interface, and I can also create an abstract class, which is almost the same thing. I'm creating my shape for my class. I'm shaping it, right? In this particular case, when I can't use an interface to do that with properties, not the same way, right? Because what it says, right? If my F2 won't work. My F2 will kind of zone in here and it won't work properly, right? There is no quick fix, if you notice. If I go quick fix, it says there's no suggestions because now if I do this, if I say my strength is always got to equal to 10 as a default, right? That will work, right? Because now I'm giving it a default value. Do I want my strength to be a minimum of 10? How about this? My final inch strength for my abilities,
Isn't it
right?
supposed to be like 100?
No, that's maximum. But my strength is 10. I say my minimum strength is 10 for my hero, because I'm making it a hero, right?
Okay.
So let's say the average human being, this is where we're going with this. Let's say my average human, the strength is like 5, right? But the hero can be as strong as 100, so it's really, really strong, right? If I set the default values to 10, they're going to get overridden anyway, correct? Because I'm going to generate my abilities, and they're going to go to whatever they're going to be, right? So here, it doesn't make sense for me to put it to 10. It's better just to set it at 0 to start off, because I haven't set a default value, right? So I might as well set it to 0 to do that. If I do this, right, it'll fix it. Hold on. But the problem is, if I put final or leave it out,
You don't have to put final yet.
not yet. If I leave it out like this, here's my interface. And if I go into my, this is the problem now, right? If I go back to my hero and I go implement action, right, and abilities, so I can do both, right, with the comma, is it erroring out? Nope. It's not erroring out. Because I can override them. I'm telling you I need strength, speed, and health, and they're all initialized at 0, right? I'm initializing them. But, so I can't, if I leave one of these out, like for example, let's say I don't have a health, right? Then I'm going to get errors down below. Hold on a second. Right? I'm getting an error because way down here, I'm printing it out. Okay, so let's just get rid of it. Let's say I don't want to just show it, right? Because I'm making sure with my with my class here, right? But I'm still getting an issue. I was getting an issue, but now it's gone. Look, it's commented out. I don't need my health, but yet I do because I said so. I said in my abilities, right? In my abilities, I need a strength, a speed, and a health. Does that mean I still have access to health? No, it does not. So this is invalid, right? I'm trying to show you that just because it works for methods doesn't mean it works for abilities.
So the whole point of the exercise was to show that.
Yeah, it doesn't work, right? That's the whole idea. Now there might be something else. Like for example, if I want to make the villain class has to have steals, right? And has to have something else. Maybe something else that the villain has to have. Or a speedster, he has to have a certain thing that other people don't have, right? It further delineates that class. So not only is it a subclass, but it also requires you to implement this shape, the shape of this class with this extra method. That's what you're doing. You're forcing that class to have that shape. And you might say, well, it's useless, whether I want to use it or not. But just like when we can say TypeScript is useless too. It's just syntactic sugar, right, to give us errors, right? And it's a way of planning or plotting out our classes, especially when it comes to business rules. Someone's going to come along when you're working in business, and they're going to say, okay, here's the business rules. It's got to have this, 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 and this. Once they say that, you create an interface. And then you won't forget to implement these 5 things, right? Think of it that way. Or let's say an abstract class, and this abstract class, that's the next level we're going to get to, not yet. This abstract class is going to be not only interfaces, but everything, all the things, but it's never going to be instantiated. Abstract classes aren't instantiated, they're inherited.
So that's what I'm wondering. Like, so when you create an interface, when you first told that you need this, this, and this, if it doesn't point out the errors anyway, how is it going to make a difference?
Oh, it'll point it out. In the abstract class, you put all the stuff you want. It's like a blueprint or the shape. You define the shape of your class before you create your class. It's almost like you're talking about your business rules. So I'm trying to figure out another way to saying this to you so you get it, right?
No, I got it.
And then...
it's like the foundation.
Yeah. Okay, now look at this. Here we go. I'm trying to inherit abilities, but abilities doesn't exist. And everything is erroring out now. Okay.
Yeah.
But at least you guys are getting it. The idea here is that
There's one more.
as you're following me, I'm looking for it. As you're...
Yeah. Five methods.
Health.
Five methods.
No, it's the
Under public, yeah.
that one.
And actually, I should have done this one too, right?
You should just give us all laser pointers.
I should. Okay, so let's try and create some other options here. So I go to Source, right-click, New, and these are the other things I have. I have an enum, an annotation, a class, an interface, right? These are the kind of things I can do. What about if I create another kind of class, like we said, right? Except this time I'm going to call it an abstract class. Here's my abstract class, right? And I'm going to call this the entity class. Right? Here's my entity class. And there is no constructors from the superclass in this case because it is the superclass, right? And I don't need public static void main. I am not inheriting abstract methods, right? And I'm not going to generate any comments. So let's press finish. Well, the entity class, I use the abstract keyword, right? Okay, so what's the difference? What do you think the difference is between an entity class or abstract class and a normal class? I already said it one time. I never instantiate it. I only create it just like I create an interface so that it can be extended. Okay, so I never ever instantiate this thing. It's almost like the blueprint of the blueprint, right? So when I make it, here's my abstract class, and if I create a class with different objects, I can start typing in things like protected, let's try this again, strength, right? And see how it accepts it now? Because I can do all this kind of stuff, protected int speed, protected int health, and I want to make it, I believe, public for string name, right? So I want these things that I want to include in my other classes. I also want them to have a couple of options, right? But let's say, can my abstract class, let's go to the next level, can it implement? Can it implement action?
No.
Right? If that's the case, if it can implement action, right? And I've got my private, protected, and all this kind of stuff up here. This is regular. And if I save it, right? Well, it doesn't error out, right? I'm telling it implements action, but I haven't defined in my interface itself. Here's my interface. My interface says I need a public void fight and a public void run, right? Okay, let's take to the next level. Can I then, as a, if I create a class, I'll go back to my hero, can this just, instead of implementing action, can I just extend entity? Because what I'm telling it to do is, here's the shape of my class. My shape of my class is going to have strength, which I do, the speed, and a health. Right? If I create another class, instead of hero, I call him man or person, right? And I extend the entity class, right? And I don't include a strength, the speed, and the health, it's going to error out, which is what I want. It's just giving me code hinting. It's giving me saying, Tom, you haven't followed your business rules. Don't forget, you need these two things when you include this class. You need these two things. You need the interface, and I need my I need this other stuff. So, for example, if I change my fight, instead of fight, I call it to fights, right? I'm just saying, right? It's going to error out because now it says the type hero must implement the inherited abstract method action fight because it's inherited inside my entity class. Right? That's why. You get that one?
We don't have anything that says fight.
I changed it Well, the entity class implements action, and it's an abstract class. So the interface itself is enough.
Oh. Oh, okay. Yeah.
I know it's funny, but I'm telling you this stuff because you're going to see implements, you're going to see extends, and you're going to see the abstract classes that we're creating. Okay, and that's it for today. So let's do a recap before we stop.
So if you change this to fights, there will be an error because
Updated project to include abstract class and interface.
You know those two blocks, they're like sister blocks that fit perfectly together.
Okay, so here's where I want to go with this. We talked about classes again this time around, right? We talked about in our classes, our class example, right? So we talked about classes and objects. We talked about inheritance, and we know that we can use the extends keyword to create new classes based off other classes. And this really makes it much more powerful when we use object-oriented programming for code reuse. So I could reuse my objects over and over and over again. I can define a class, and the power even further than this is, what happens when I change my hero class? If I change my hero class and add stuff to it, the villain class, the vigilante class, the speedster class, and the strongman class, all of them get changed all at once. I don't have to repeat my code, right, in that particular instance. And that's the power of inheritance more than anything else. I start with a small building block, and then from there I grow, and I grow, and I grow. So example, one day when we get to the JavaScript side of things, maybe we'll even do it here with Android, we're going to create something called game object. My game object can move, can fight, can fire, can get hit, you know, has some kind of defense, all that kind of stuff, right? And every object in my game will be a game object, right? If I add everything I add to my game object, every other object will have. Okay, and that's it for me.